So, good vach, everybody. Shavua Tov. Nice to see everybody. Nice to be with everybody. It's an honor to introduce this inaugural session of the CRC pre-Shavuos Shir series. I think my topic has to do more with financial repercussions of the current coronavirus crisis and what the various implications, ramifications are with respect to all kinds of potential financial disputes in front of the Beis Din, regarding canceled contracts, regarding canceled simchos, and regarding employment arrangements, like, for example, payments to teachers, payments to schools, yeshivas, things of that variety. Questions have arisen regarding canceled playgroups and babysitting arrangements, all kinds of shilos that have come up. How do we deal with it from a halacha l'maisa perspective? So I'd like to just begin with a comment that Rav Soloveitchik makes regarding the Shavuos. We know that there's an internal contradiction regarding the Kabbalah Satorah that took place in connection with Ma'amad Har Sinai, that Bnei Yisrael said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we're going to accept the Torah unconditionally, even before we know everything that's written in it and everything that's going to be commanded of us, kind of what we expect nowadays of Gerim, of converts who replicate the Kabbalah's HaTorah Har Sinai experience, that even if they haven't had Hodas, HaMitzvos, they haven't been informed of all 630 mitzvos, as long as they say in the mikveh, Na'aseh v'nishma, Eseh v'eshma, that they're prepared to accept the Torah regardless of what it requires, that's considered to be good enough in order to be admitted into Klal Yisrael, just like at Har Sinai, that was considered to be good enough. That's the Kabbalah Satorah aspect of Shavuos. Then you have the Gemara that picks up on the pasuk that says, Reiss yasvu b'sachti sahar, that the Jewish people were standing on the foot of the mountain, and the Gemara comments, Malami shekaf aleim ahar kigigis. That teaches us that a Kadosh Baruch Hu suspended all of Har Sinai over their heads like a giant tub, and said, Im tekabu es the Torah mutav, v'im lav sham take v'raschem. To accept the Torah, all will be fine and good. If not, then sham, there, is going to be your burial place. So that seems to indicate that wasn't necessarily so voluntary. And of course, the commentators struggle to reconcile these two different accounts, so to speak, of Ma'amad Har Sinai, whether it was a voluntary acceptance of the Torah, whether it was coerced. Famous Medrash Tanchuma says, yeah, Torah Shebaal Peh, that was easy enough, so that was accepted voluntarily. Torah Shebaal Peh, which requires a lot of exertion, a lot of hard work, so that had to be coerced. That's why we make up the fact that we didn't accept that part so willingly to begin with the fact that we stay up all of Shavuos night, learning particularly Torah Shebaal Peh, to indicate that now we're prepared to accept it voluntarily. Now we're prepared to accept it willingly. I like to say that this might explain why we're always referring to this experience that is the seminal and defining experience of the Jewish people to receive the Torah at Har Sinai. What do we call it? We always call it Kabbalah Satorah, our acceptance of the Torah. But when we daven in the Shmona Esrei, we say that this is Zman Matan Torasenu. This is the time that the Torah was Matan Torasenu. The Torah was given over to us. So what's the difference between Kabbalah Satorah and Zman Matan Torasenu? So I think this represents the dual aspects of Kabbalah Satorah, that on the one hand, it's Kabbalah Satorah. On some level, we said Na'aseh v'nishma, but on another level, it was Man Matan Torasenu. It was the time in which the Torah was forced upon us on some level, that there is sort of this coercive element regarding our receiving of the Torah. And perhaps when HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks about the experience. So it's imtekablu es Torah mutav, and it's Moshe Kibel Torah misinai. That the official Torah account is that Bnei Yisrael accepted it when mekabel the Torah besimcha, happily, willingly, and so forth. And from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's perspective, that is what is celebrated. But from our perspective, so in the Shmon Esrei, we say, you know what? Even that which we didn't accept willingly, so we're celebrating Zman Matan Torah Seinu. We're celebrating that you forced us to do more. You forced us to accept more than that which we were originally prepared to accept willingly. Now, of course, in the days of Mordechai and Esther, it says, Kimu v'kiblu Yehudim, Kimu mashikiblu kfar, that we accepted even that part willingly. That's what we're celebrating. It's like on Pesach, the famous word of Levi Medinah, that we call it Pesach because we celebrate what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us, Shepasacha b'nei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim, that he had compassion on us and he passed over us when he was smiting the firstborn of the Egyptians. But from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's perspective, it's Chag HaMatzos. That's what appears in the Torah, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu celebrates what we did, that we had trusted him, that we were prepared to leave very hurriedly and quickly, even before our dough was prepared to rise, like the tefillin, which our tefillin, we say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillin, according to the Gemara, says, Mika Amcha Yisrael Goy Echad Ba'aretz, that he celebrates the Jewish people. Same idea, HaKadosh Baruch Hu celebrates the Kabbalah Torah, celebrates our Kabbalah Torah. We celebrate that even if it had to be forced upon us, we recognize that it was good for us. But the part that was forced upon us, so what does it say? It says, in the Kabbalah Torah, mutav, vimlav, sham tehek v'raschem. If not, there is going to be your burial place. So why does it say, sham tehek v'raschem? There is going to be your burial place. It should say, kan tehek v'raschem. Right here, we're going to drop the mountain on top of all of you. That'll be the end of you. That's not over there. That's right here. So why does it say sham? So Rav Soloveitchik explained that on some level, there are going to be major tests. It was easy enough to accept the Torah at Har Sinai. We saw the Nisim and Inflows that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us. We knew that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was taking good care of us, had struck the Egyptians with all of these plagues and had rescued us from our slavery and our servitude, and had split the sea for us. And we knew that we had the man falling from heaven, that we were going to be 100% protected. We saw Ma'amad Har Sinai with our own eyes, saw the lightning and the thunder, and all of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in revealed fashion, that a shifcha, a maidservant, saw at Har Sinai, when we were splitting the sea, what Yechezkel Mebuzi wasn't able to see in his Nevuah. So we were on a very high level, as the Targum says, Targum Yona son, and as the Meshech Chochmah points out, that we saw it like in an Aspaklaria Me'ira, we saw in crystal clear fashion the presence of a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But there will be times in history in which there'll be more of a hest upon him, in which it will be much more difficult to be able to behold the presence of a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if we are less zealous and fervent about our devotion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Torah at that time, so the Torah is warning us up front. Right now it's easy. Right now you can accept the Torah willingly and voluntarily, and you don't see any impediments. But there may come a time in which there are going to be impediments. So you have to recognize, if that should ever happen, sham tehekvu aschem. There, you're not going to last anymore. If you don't keep the Torah, then you're not going to be able to have a perseverance. You're not going to be able to have a continued survival as a people. You have to remain devoted and steadfast to the Torah, regardless of circumstances. There's a variation of this word by Rav Soloveitchik, which goes like this, which says, the idea of sham is, right now, it's difficult for me to keep the Torah, but sham, there, when we get to that point in which I'll be able to do things normally, in which things will come easy for me, so sham, then I'll keep the Torah. Wait another week, wait another month, maybe next year, when things are going to be more streamlined, when things are going to be more normalized, so then I'll keep the Torah again. So there the Torah says again, no. Sham, take for aschem. If that's going to be your attitude, that you can't do it right now, that it's only can't do it right here, that it's only going to be sham, it's only going to be when things are fully functioning. We can apply it to this situation. Yeshivas are fully up and running, shuls are fully up and running. You don't have to wear the masks and the gloves and everything else. So only then you're going to keep all the Torah. No, that's not going to work. You have to keep the Torah regardless of the difficulty of the circumstances. You have to do it right here and now, even when the here and now is very, very challenging. The same thing is true regarding what we're experiencing at the moment. These are challenging times, and it's very difficult to keep all of the precepts and all of the laws of the Torah in optimal fashion. But nonetheless, we're told you got to do it. You got to do it anyway. You got to do it to your fullest ability. If it means that things are a little bit different, that the halachos apply in a different fashion, you have to accept that. You have to recognize that, and you have to go along with that. And you have to follow whatever is the halacha l'maaseh in the specific situation in which you find ourselves. We've been very fortunate during this coronavirus that we've had the hadracha of Gedolei Yisrael, of major poskim telling us, okay, here's how you conduct yourself. Here's how you daven 3 times a day, even without a minyan, during the coronavirus. Here's how you conduct a seder during the coronavirus. Here's how you substitute for Kriyas HaTorah during the coronavirus. There have been psakim coming out practically daily from luminaries such as Rav Hershel Schachter, a Shlita, from Rav Mordechai Willard Shlita. We had to deal with doing Mechiras Chametz in a different fashion this year, the authorization of the forms and so forth and so forth. Everything has required a renewed approach. Everything has required a careful inspection of all of the Makas and all of the sources to figure out how to adopt it, how to adapt it to our specific situation. But there's no such thing as saying, well, the Torah is only applicable sham. No, the Torah is applicable kan. The Torah is applicable even to coronavirus, even to a magefa, even to what the Gemara refers to as a dever be'ir. People get all uptight that during this period of time, it's not so simple, for example, to go to shul. We have seen certain tensions over the last couple of weeks, a tremendous desire. Everybody wants to get back in circulation, get back to shul, and so forth. And I'd like to point out, you look at the halacha of the chiyuv of tefillah b'tzibur in Shulchan Aruch, in Orach Chaim. So the Shulchan Aruch says, so what's the obligation? That a person is obligated to try his best to make all efforts to daven b'tzibur. That's the kima tefillah b'tzibur, to want to daven b'tzibur. If it turns out circumstances are such that it's a sakana, and therefore you can't daven b'tzibur, so you fulfill your obligation by wanting to daven b'tzibur. You have to wait until it's the right time. You have sometimes a chilukei deos as to exactly what is the right time. But the Gemara in Baba Kama says, if there is an epidemic in the city, there's a pandemic in the entire world, you have to go inside. You have to go into Chadrei Mishkavcha. You got to go inside of your innermost chambers and wait. You got to wait a little bit until the anger, until the devastation passes. And you owe it to yourselves, and you owe it to your neighbors. And when I say your neighbors, I mean both your Jewish neighbors, your non-Jewish neighbors. You owe it to your entire community to make sure that you take all necessary steps of precaution in order not to spread the disease, not to receive the disease, not to carry the disease. And if it means so, we have to wait longer. So that also is a fulfillment of the Kabbalah Satorah. That's a fulfillment of Kabbalah Satorah. And so too, the Gemara gives us very specific guidelines regarding how we apply the Torah to monetary situations when there is a dever be'ir, when there is a magefa, when there is a pandemic, when there is a terrible disease that's going around, terrible environmental conditions that require people to stop working, close their offices, and so forth. The Gemara refers to this as Makas Medinah, as a plague of the land. The plague of the land can take various forms. It could be terrible hurricanes. It could be terrible floodings of lands that people were irrigating when they used to rent land. You had land tenants that would work on land and pay a certain rental fee. So if the land dried up, or there was flooding on that particular land, so then the halacha was mazel chagarim, that the tenants, it was the tenants' rotten luck. And if they agreed to pay a certain fee, that meant if the land would be fruitful, if the land wouldn't be fruitful, that you have to pay the rental fee anyway. But the Mishnah and the Gemara say if it was a Makas Medinah, it was something that affected the entire region, something that affected the entire country, that was flooding all over the place. You can't say that was the tenant's bad luck, or that's everybody's bad luck. So in such a situation, the tenant wouldn't have to pay. The rules are different. And what does it mean? The rules are different. The rules are different, meaning that if he's a muhsok, maybe, that we would say somebody who has the money doesn't have to pay the money. The tenant's not getting the better side of the bargain. It's not getting the value of what she paid for. So then there's no obligation to pay. How do you translate that to regular workers? We're not renting a field per se, but they're working. They're a playgroup leader. They're a teacher in a school. And now there's some type of a Makas Medinah. There's some type of a plague that overruns the entire land, that prevents them from teaching, from doing their job. Do we say that the normal rule is that if there would be an onus that would prevent a worker from being able to do their work, and this is something that neither side, not the employer or the employee, could have anticipated, or both of them could have equally anticipated, or the worker could have anticipated it more than the employer who's hiring the worker. So then the worker loses out. The only time the worker gets paid if there is some unintended, unexpected circumstance is if the employer really knew this might have happened, but didn't share it with the employee, didn't share it with the worker. Okay, so then we say that's bad faith. So in such a, the employer hired a teacher to teach the employer's son, and the employer knew that the son was likely to get very sick and wouldn't be able to be taught, and didn't share that with the teacher. And then the son, unfortunately, the child unfortunately gets sick, and the teaching can't continue. So then we say that was something that was information that should have been shared. But otherwise, the worker usually loses out. So do we say, well, just like in the case of the land tenant, the tables are turned when there's a Makas Medinah, so too here, maybe the tables should be turned. And maybe when there's some sort of a plague that affects the entire land, that prevents the teacher from teaching, so maybe now there is an obligation to pay the teacher. So that in fact is what the Mordechai says. The Mordechai says if there was what kind of a plague stops a teacher from teaching. So he gives an example where there is a decree that's issued by the government that says that we decree that it's going to be forbidden to teach Torah. Nobody's allowed to teach Torah anymore for the next year, whatever it is. And therefore, a teacher who had been hired is not able to teach Torah. So this is not the bad luck of the teacher. It's the bad luck of everybody. And therefore, we say that the teacher doesn't have to suffer the loss. Rather, the parent who hired the teacher, the school that hired the teacher, has to pay the teacher's salary. So that is quoted by the Ramah and Shulchan Aruch. Ramah seems to indicate that you have a Makas Medinah. Other poskim say explicitly this, of course, applies to an epidemic where nobody's able to leave their homes, and you can't have teaching for that reason. So for sure, in such a situation, it wouldn't be, in such a situation, the teacher has the upper hand and would get to be paid. That's the opinion quoted by the Ramah in the name of the Mordechai. The Nesivos Mishpat and the Vilna Gaon say they don't understand this at all. The case of the land tenant, a land tenant is the one that normally would have to pay. And now we say if there's a Makas Medinah, so then he's off the hook from paying. So in the case of the teacher doesn't normally get paid whenever there's any kind of an onus, of an unforeseen circumstance. So all the more so if there's a Makas Medinah, we should why should all the risk and all of the loss be imposed upon the balabayas, on the employer? For sure, then the employer shouldn't have to pay anything. So the Gemara says, I don't understand this ruling whatsoever. For sure, under these circumstances, there also should be an exemption. And the Sma takes a middle position. Rabbi Shua Falk, his commentary to the Shulchan Aruch, says, I understand the reasoning a little bit, that we can't say that it's only the teacher's bad luck, it's everybody's bad luck, and therefore I could see a svara that maybe they should share the loss equally, and the teacher should only get paid 50% of his wages under these circumstances. Or maybe we say that in the event that he already got paid, so he doesn't have to return the money. So that's kind of how the SMA leaves things. And as a result, you have sort of like this three-way machlokis of how to deal with a Makas Medinah. So what do? So the Chassam Sofer says that he had a case. He was in Pressburg, and there was a war between France and Austria in 1809, and they were shooting cannonballs into the region where the Chassam Sofer lived, and as a result, nobody could leave their homes and nobody could go and teach. So the question was, do you pay the teachers? Do you not pay the teachers? So the Chassam Sofer said, I personally paid everything. Why should the teacher be deprived from getting their salary? That's what the Ramah Paskin from the Mordechai. However, he said that since there were other opinions that seemed to disagree, you have the SMA, for example. So he said that we'll make a pshara. What should the pshara be? So pay 50%. So some of the poskim said, okay, so if you have a teacher out of work, you have to pay 50%. But they say that's only, but the teacher's not working, so why pay even if 50% is sort of the pshara? Under these circumstances, you also have to take into account that the teacher's not teaching anything. So there's such a thing as pol bato. Maybe you have to subtract a little bit, because the person is relieved from their job altogether. So whatever is the standard of payment, you have to lower that to account for the fact that the person's not actually teaching. So some of the contemporary poskim said, okay, for a teacher, we don't lower the amount because it's more painful for a teacher not to teach than to teach, but for a Torah teacher. But if you're dealing with like a playgroup leader that's not teaching Torah, or somebody in a different capacity, so you have to adjust the amount. So maybe if you say that a pol batel, that if I let off a worker for no good reason, I have to pay them like the amount somebody would be willing to take to do nothing. So there's a Taz that says that's about 50%. So you would pay that person 50% and 50% around 25%. So that's what Rav Asher Weiss said originally recommended for like playgroup leaders. Give them between 25%, 33%. That's what the Lakewood Besdin had something along those lines as well. And others pointed out that, it's difficult to come up with perfect numbers. And especially since you have opinions that say you're off the hook from paying altogether, somebody is poor, they're not able to pay. You really have to judge every single situation differently. The bottom line is everybody took a hit in these situations, whether you're dealing with camps that are now being canceled and so forth. There was my children, two of them were supposed to go to Morasha Kolel this past summer, and we got a letter from Camp Morasha saying we're going to have to cancel, it looks like, and we're going to give a full refund. So it's certainly nice to the degree that you're not providing a service and you can, give a full refund. So that's certainly, something which is appreciated. You're dealing with people who are in difficult circumstances. You make a pshara, you try to make some sort of a compromise. You think about a teacher who really wants to teach. The nice thing is, though, that nowadays you really can teach through Zoom. We're doing it right now. So certainly if a teacher goes out of their way to continue to teach, it seems to me that they should get their full wages. If somebody has the ability to go out of their way to provide a service and doesn't do it, so then you have a separate halacha, which is based on a Tosfos, that says if a person, even though there's a Makas Medinah, they can still get the job done. They talk with Sachbulos. They can figure out how to get on Zoom and to provide, even a play group leader, figure out how to have davening with the kids, something, every single morning. So then they're really obligated to do whatever they can do. That's also something which should be nichnas l'toch ha'cheshbon. Bottom line is, very difficult to come up with across the board rules when it comes to these situations, because you have all of these different shitos that we're supposed to do. Lefnim Yeshiva Sadin, we're supposed to, as Rav Shechter wrote a piece, Utstaka Tatzil Mimavis. You have a plague. The main thing, you should act in a fashion of stalker. You should act in a charitable fashion. Try to give people, especially if they're trying their best, they really want to do. So you try to give them something. You don't take money, somebody advanced money to you, and you're not providing the services b'chlal. And then you try to be reasonable in terms of returning monies, certainly that you didn't have to expend for out-of-pocket expenses. You have to have that type of sensitivity on both sides of the aisle in terms of our job to really do what we can to act with chesed towards each other. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu will act with chesed towards us, especially during these difficult times. My Rabbi, Mordechai Willig, pointed out the incident, after Abraham had defeated the four kings who had gone to war against the five kings, and then they came to him afterwards and said, give me over, the people, that you were able to rescue and so forth. Don't keep them as spoils of the war, and you can keep all of the money that you want to keep. So we should have the same attitude. Turn to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, say, keep us alive, keep our families alive, keep our neighbors, our communities alive. And it's okay. The money will be mevater on the money. Money's not as important. Right now, what really matters is the dinei nefashos, that we have to keep safe. Kadosh Baruch Hu should watch over us, and we should go into Shavuos. As we said, that we go in as a united people with a sense of love, with a sense of achdus, and a sense of chai b'hem, that we should be able to live in accordance with the Torah. Kimu v'kiblu ha'Yehudim. We should be able to keep every single aspect of the Torah shebektav, the Torah shebal peh, to be able to keep ourselves alive, so that we should be able to continue to keep the Torah always under all circumstances, including now. And this should usher in days of better health and greater happiness. And Mirza Hashem, Bias Gold Tzedek, B'mheira v'yameinu.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Reiss. We really appreciate it.